This is the year 1944. The free men of the world are marching together to victory.
As the build-up continued at a furious pace, invention and data began to be transferred relatively easily between the Allies, and solutions to the problems facing them for such a large operation began to be found. In the battle to win safe passage across the Atlantic for the essential convoys, improved tactics to deal with the submarine threat and special vessels had evolved with sophisticated underwater radar and depth charging. The submarines could be detected, hunted and sunk more efficiently. And when they had to surface, another deadly foe, the long-range Liberators, Sunderlands and Catalina PBYs would then dive into the attack and sink the sub with cannon fire and depth charges. Special escort carriers with adapted aircraft helped cover the mid-Atlantic air gap.
While at sea, the first forward-throwing, multi-barrel depth charge called a Hedgehog was proving highly successful.
The code crackers of Bletchley Park gave the Navy and Air Force information of when and where the wolf packs were assembling. So great were the losses that Admiral Donitz began recalling his U-boats back to the safety of their bomb-proof bunkers in Brittany. On the open seas, there was nowhere for the U-boats to be safe. More ships carrying men and supplies could cross the ocean in preparation for the invasion of Europe. In the air and on the land, newer technologies started to give the Allies an edge.
Air power is playing a crucial battle before the campaign, and it's not just about getting air superiority over the beaches, but over a much larger swathe than that. And that is achieved by the middle of April.
The Normandy road and railway systems had been effectively disabled by Allied bombing.
Thereafter, the Allies can concentrate on absolutely wrecking German communication networks. And this is really important because although the Allies have got vast material wealth built up in the UK, they've got to get it across the channel. And the moment they touch down, the moment the cat is out of the bag and D-Day is happening, suddenly the race is on for which side can build up material quickly.
When the American-built P-51 Mustang had its performance greatly enhanced by the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine and fitted with drop tanks, it increased its range. The US Air Force had a potent fighter escort to protect its bombers, as they conducted devastating and extremely hazardous daylight raids deep into German territory, crippling the war machine effort and isolating large areas of northern France. The big friends of the Liberators and Fortress bombers now had the little friends on their wing teams. With the RAF crippling the German war machine by night and the Americans by day, this joint effort greatly weakened Germany's chances of repelling the forthcoming invasion. Where to land this increasing, burgeoning and impatient force was perhaps the greatest risk of the operation. More and more, the open beaches of Normandy became an obvious sight for the Allies. Most importantly, it was in range of Allied air cover.
Blowing up bridges, attacking railways, hitting marshalling yards, destroying roads, hitting the communications networks such as radar chains. All this is done spectacularly well before D-Day.
But the planners had to be sure. Small groups of specialists were formed to gather as much information about the area as possible. Sailing small fishing boats from ports on the south coast such as Falmouth and the Helford River, disguised as French fishermen, they gathered information about tides, currents, beaches and mapped the area. In the local Cornish pubs, it was not unusual to find a group of well-spoken men dressed as fishermen, drinking, laughing and joking, but obviously not from the area. SOE guys and other clandestine operations were supported by fast patrol boats or motor gunboats, picking up spies, secret correspondents, downed airmen or French resistance fighters with information. It was a perilous job, executed in frightening circumstances for all concerned. George Cady was a gunner on board a Royal Navy motor torpedo boat, similar to 102, currently getting ready for one of the D-Day's events.
Of course we were bloody. Yes, of course. You know, we weren't idiots.
Returning from a nighttime mission in a small convoy, George's boat hit a mine and blew in half.
In the dark, water up to my chin, took us back to one of the other boats. They hauled me up the side of the boat, stripped me off, took me down aft, gave me a big glass of rum and put me in the stoker's bunk. And the tow rope parted with a bang. And in my subconscious, this was another mine going off. And within 15 seconds, I'm standing on the bridge alongside the skipper, Ginger Food, absolutely stark naked. And he said to me, "What the bloody hell do you think you're doing, Charter? Go put some clothes on."
These operations were top secret, and the information recovered helped plan for the invasion. There was one great problem that had to be overcome successfully. That of getting the men and machines ashore safely, quickly and effectively. The paratroopers had their own way to drop into enemy territory, and being lightly armed, fight ferociously to take and hold the ground. But what are the heavier units of the army? The infantry, tanks, equipment, artillery and vehicles. How to get them across over 200 miles of sea and land them safely on the enemy shore? One part of the answer was landing craft. Special boats that could deliver men and machinery of war onto the hostile beach. The smallest craft of these was the landing craft vehicle or personnel. It was a Higgins boat, built out of cross-layered plywood. With the shallow draft, she could carry 36 fully armed men right up onto the beach, and even small vehicles such as jeeps. These became one of the most useful vessels of the war. Most of the ones you see nowadays are in very, very rough condition. But luckily, I know a man who's got one. The landing craft, humble as it may seem, actually did help win the war.
One of the unsung heroes of World War II, I guess.
Like many people, James has a passion for keeping the past alive. I have my 1944 Jeep. The 1944 Willys MB. But that is a very small project compared to what other people get up to.
So she's picking up.
It's one thing to drop a new engine into a wartime Jeep, but it's a hell of a lot more to do with a 70-year-old boat that has to be safe, seaworthy and operational in just a few weeks' time for one of the D-Day shows.
You have to make sure that everyone's safe, and the last thing I want on my conscience is anything to ever happen to anyone on my watch. There's very few of them left in preservation, to be truthful, and the majority of the ones you see out and about are the post-war fiberglass ones, which is what we've got here. It was used in various films, and it was in Saving Private Ryan. Monuments Men, make it look a bit more official for George Clooney. We put in the wooden rib. My wife used the word obsession as opposed to a hobby, so I think she's probably quite accurate. As the veterans disappear, these are the only tangible things that are left, just to remind people of sort of the sacrifices made in war, and also the terrible waste of war. As you sit in this boat, you sort of have an appreciation being in it. And you can just think about what those poor chaps went through. If you're going in, you'd be down on one knee.
Imagine bouncing around in this with the sea slapping everywhere, coming over the sides, throwing you around like a cork.
Like I said, the armour plate stops there, but anything above you, you're very vulnerable. And obviously if you're going in and there's a cliff face, and they're looking down on you, it's even worse. As soon as the door drops, you're very, very vulnerable.
There were other variations too of landing craft, but the largest and most versatile was the LST, or Landing Ship Tank. The LSTs used for D-Day and many other operations had been hurriedly built in the USA and performed extremely well in North Africa and Italy. They were one of the main solutions to the problem of delivering the invasion force. These cavernous vessels were almost 330 feet long and 50 feet wide, with a crew of 100. They not only carried the smaller landing craft on their sides, but their voluminous interiors meant that trucks, tanks, men and machines could be put ashore with relative ease and supply the beachhead once it had been secured.
This drag of 6.5 feet enables the LST to move up on any beach that slopes at least 1 foot every 50.
lets the ship rest there firmly.
And as the tide rose again,
Close bow doors and secure for sea.
then they could take casualties and other material for a return trip to the UK. Despite the huge numbers built, only 3 of these vessels remain in serviceable condition today. LST-325 is now restored to her former glory in Indiana as a floating museum. Like many of her type, she was used extensively for boarding and disembarking practice along the Devon and Cornwall southern coast before setting off for Normandy. There were many reasons for choosing the southwest of England as the assembly point for the invasion troops. It was remote, sparsely populated, and offered many deep water estuaries, harbours, rivers and woodland in which to hide and assemble the vast number of troops, machines and other landing vessels prior to the invasion. The whole area was cordoned off. There was no access to this apart from military personnel and those authorised by the highest level. This estuary became a hiding ground for landing craft, motor torpedo boats and other small craft. And it was in range of the Normandy beaches. D-Day was coming ever closer, day by day, hour by hour. The day was coming. As D-Day drew closer, training and practice for loading, landing and disembarking intensified. In hidden river valleys and other deep water inlets, landing ramps or hards were built. And I went deeper into Cornwall in search of some of the last remaining places where American troops trained and then embarked for Normandy. Between June the 1st and 6th, around 26 LSTs were loaded at this point and further downriver with elements of the 29th and the 1st Infantry Division. Their destination? The beaches designated Utah and Omaha. The only way I can get to it is across this river, and there's the ferry ahead in sight. And then this river goes straight the way down to Falmouth and then out into the English Channel. As I got across to the other side, evidence of the wartime American presence became clear. It looks like we got another road. A concrete road, totally different to all the other roads in the area. This is one put down by the Seabees, the construction engineers. God knows what this must have been like with the big old 6-wheelers, the trucks and the tanks and everything going into the landing craft. And there it was, Tolverne, embarkation point for the 29th and the Big Red One. The small pub became a billet and headquarters for the US units. In hidden river valleys and other deep water inlets, landing ramps or hards were built. The peace and calm would be shattered by an American engineering battalion who cut their own road through the neighbouring land, down to the shore and built a landing hard for the LSTs. Helped often by local companies, these constructions appeared almost overnight. The shore part was solid concrete. The part that was underwater was covered by a concrete mat, rolled out like a giant carpet. These concrete chocolate boxes are still found today where they were used. So when they left this, the next bit of terra firma they found was on the northern coast of France. One guy who embarked from this area with the LSTs and later scrambled down nets into the smaller LVPs landed on Omaha after the first wave had gone through that murderous killing ground.
And when they found out that I did mechanic work, they put me in the maintenance battalion. And that's where I learned to work on tanks and stuff like that. A ship to take us across the ocean to England, and that's where we started, maneuvering and practicing to go across the channel and help fight the war. When we landed in England, we knew what we were there for. When we landed on Omaha Beach, they let the gate down to let us out. When they opened that gate, we knew that was war, and that was it. I mean, that's what you were going to do there.
All along the south coast of England, these embarkation points had to be close to the camps and accessible by water. and it didn't matter how grand your dwelling might be. Some of the old mansions, beautiful gardens and estates would play a significant part in D-Day, and the signs are still there today. Edgecombe Park near Plymouth was covered in new roads and concrete to help load the 29th Division. So this is Barn Pool, Mount Edgecombe, and this whole thing was actually built here as a massive piece of matted concrete so that the Americans could bring all of their equipment right down to the seafront and drive them right up onto the ramps of the landing craft. The wondrous gardens at Trebar had a road run through them, and the boathouse was dynamited to make way for the trucks, tanks and landing craft of the 1st and other divisions. Once the GIs got on board here, the next land they'd touch would be Normandy. Most of these guys were destined for Omaha. Further along the coast, just outside Weymouth, the Americans adopted the old Roman roads to get themselves and their equipment from the camps to the landing ramps. Steve Ellis George had organised a convoy run from the camp at Broadmain in Dorset to the embarkation point in Castletown, Weymouth. Following exactly the same route, we began getting ready at 6 a.m. This very field, it would have been full of American troops who, after living here for months, penned into this fortress of Dorset, would one morning pack their bags and leave in a matter of hours, some never to come back.
Obviously in Broadmain we had cannon companies with the howitzers, we had infantry, we had the Rangers leaving from here, so depending on what sort of landing craft they're going besides of the convoy basically. This is the exact route, and it's the first time anyone's attempted to do this since back in the days. We're just actually leaving the camp now. All around us here we're still Nissen huts, and as we go past the trees, this is the basic perimeter of the camp here. Lots of tree carvings in there.
As we're rattling along here in the 1940s half track, we're going down the same road that the American troops took from Broadmain down to Weymouth. Mile after mile of convoy going through these narrow lanes. Of the thousands of young men who came down these roads towards the embarkation point, 2,000 approximately died on D-Day on Omaha Beach alone.
In this bend here, the engineers had to actually straighten the road. They couldn't get the howitzers or all the big vehicles around, so they had to cut through the elbows. Another tank on the back.
Thousands and thousands of these young men made places like Broadmain their home. They lived here for 2 or 3 years, integrated with the community. And then one day, June the 4th, 5th or 6th, they were gone. Many of them never to return.
In front of us is Weymouth Bay, then you've got Portland right over there, and then to the right of it you've got Lyme Bay. We're going on to the old Roman road, which is the Ridgeway.
To the amazement of onlookers, we rode through town onto the Hard. We had recreated a small piece of history. And with all the practicing and preparation, it looked like all was going well for the Allies and D-Day. But in early May, just a month before the scheduled invasion of Europe, the consequences of the complexity of mounting this operation became deadly apparent. It was a somber lesson in attention to detail, and almost caused the cancellation of the greatest seaborne invasion in history.